What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, let's go on campus. A little Kauff on campus. It's a fun time of year. It's kind of sad sometimes when you look at the current time of where we're at when it comes to the football season. You're like, we don't really have that much left. I was telling Stuckey this last week. Sometimes when I scroll over, I'm like, we're already in week 10. I was looking, Ole Miss is 8-2. I'm like, God, they only got a couple games left. Football season's going a little too fast. I wish, we could do a slow rewind, go back to like week 5. I like a long football season because even sometimes it's like, oh, I got to watch Monday Night Football. It's still way better than not having football on. But one topic that's pretty controversial right now in the land of Ohio State and a television network is this big noon kickoff. And big noon kickoff, obviously, when Fox got the Big Ten a couple years ago, they created this time slot. On Pacific Standard Time, it'd be a 9 a.m. kickoff. And it's dominated. It is dominated. Now, over the course of the last 3 years, with all the good Michigan teams and all the good Ohio State teams, the overwhelming majority of those games involve those two teams. And this year, because Michigan has fallen off a cliff, the last 6 big noon kickoffs have been Ohio State. And Ohio State fans are freaking the fuck out because they go, this is insane. Why can't we get a night home game? They look at LSU, they look at Texas, they look at Georgia this week against Tennessee. They're getting all these night home games. And I think from Joel Klatt, who went on this long Twitter rant, giving his perspective from the Fox side, how well these games have done, how big this game has been for ratings, for the conference, and it's all true. And then all the Ohio State fans, well, yeah, it's been big for the conference because you're using Ohio State. This isn't some equitable transaction. It's not like, well, we'll use Iowa this week, we'll use Nebraska. You're just riding the two big dogs. And now that Michigan and Harbaugh's gone, fuck them. It's just Ohio State. It'd be like playing the Cowboys or Lakers in every primetime game. When they're good, it'd be a no-brainer. But eventually it's like, well, no one else is bringing anything to the table. And this is how it works in the NFL. Speaking of like the Bears or the Raiders or some of these bad teams, it doesn't matter if they're bad or good. Because as long as the Steelers, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Niners, right, the Packers, the Eagles, like they keep winning over the last 3 years, the Cowboys, those games get the highest ratings, yet everyone at the end of the year, during the course of the year with the payout, makes the same. Because the partnership as a whole is worth more. Now, I think Ohio State would say, well, if we went solo, we'd be like Notre Dame. Our value is worth way more than Rutgers. That's 100% true. But the value to the network as a group is very, very valuable. I do understand Fox's point of view. If this game had been the night Big Ten kickoff and it went against the SEC, because the SEC's 2 main time slots are obviously the one after Big Noon. I'm just going to go on Pacific Standard Time, are usually a 12:30 kickoff, and then the night kickoff, which is 4:30. Both those are Pacific Standard Times. So the late afternoon and then the night window, which they dominate. So Fox realized there was a gigantic opening in the morning. And it hasn't just worked, it's dominated. So 2 things can be true. This was 100% the right move for the television partner to make the highest ratings for Ohio State, Michigan, and the rest of the Big Ten when they play those teams. Also, it sucks for the fans. It really does. Because having a night game mixed in every once in a while when you are as good as Michigan has been in Ohio State, it is a big deal. It is way more fun. There is something to be said about tailgating, drinking all day, and the communal aspect that the SEC is really getting to enjoy right now. But I do think part of, and listen, Ohio State versus Indiana in 2 weeks, if they put that game at 7:30 Eastern time at night, would do well ratings-wise. But it will do better in the morning competing against nobody. Because think about that morning slot. You're not really competing against the best SEC teams ever playing each other and Notre Dame, because usually they play at some sort of, you know, time slot in the next two. I think it's a tough one. I really do. At the end of the day, you have to realize this as a fan. They need you. None of this shit would exist without us. All these sports, all the money comes from us, especially in football. The reason they're getting these massive television contracts is because we watch. And as long as we watch, we don't actually really matter, and they don't give a shit about us. And you could argue, hell, in the NBA, they lost half their audience and they doubled their television deal. So maybe it's just a unique time where television rights, with live programming for sports is so unique and powerful that we don't even matter as much. But without us, there's no money. Like, that's not an opinion, that's a fact. But so many people are watching. You can bitch and moan on social media, but if 7, 8, 9, 10 million people watch all these morning kickoffs, they're going to keep doing it. Why? Because it's working. And part of it is, like, you can complain all you want that, like, Rutgers and Minnesota bring nothing to the table, which is somewhat true in terms of the massive television ratings. But your value to these television partners is the overall inventory as well as the cash cows. So you do need them to fill in Fox Sports 1 at 7:30 at night when Minnesota plays Iowa. That does bring value to them. So at the end of the day, nothing's going to change. And one thing I do agree, as an unbiased, like, I'm not a Big Ten guy, it has helped your conference having, when you have a sweet game, Penn State, Ohio State, when you have, Michigan, Ohio State has played in that time slot forever. Michigan's played a ton of those games over the last couple of years. I watch you because you're not really competing against anyone else I want to watch. So you get me as a consumer, which if it was LSU, now with YouTube TV, I get the 4-box, but like at night, Ohio State, Indiana, or LSU, Alabama, if they're on at the same time, and I only have one option to watch one game, most people don't have multiple TVs like myself. Like, I'm choosing LSU, Alabama. So you guys have created a niche for, I would say, the sport. It sucks if you're an Ohio State fan, you want to go to the game. It probably sucks if you just want to watch the game, right? And like, just want it to feel bigger at night. But I just don't think it's going to change. I mean, unless like Ryan Day and Ohio State brass like refuse to participate. And it doesn't feel like that's going to happen anytime soon. So it's just going to be a bunch of people complaining when the same thing continues to happen. I mean, it really does. And I get where you're coming from. Like, we are as important of a college football brand as anyone in the country. And that is 100% a fact. Fox needs us really more than we need them. You could put us on any other network at most time slots, and we are going to move the needle. That is a fact. But you're signing a contract with these guys. So they got you by the balls. And they're going to utilize you. And they are utilizing you. And it is working to your benefit because more people are watching this game than they would otherwise, which still a lot of people would watch. But because of the less competition, in a weird way, it is also working to your benefit in terms of the program. One thing that's crazy, the way college football's kind of played itself out is like the ACC with Miami losing and obviously Clemson falling apart and losing some games. Like, they're only getting one team in. The Big 12, they're only getting one team in. So we have 4 conferences that whoever wins the conference championship gets an automatic bid. But when we look at the SEC and we look at the Big 10, I think the over-under on that, the amount of teams of those 2 conferences is like 7.5. If I was a betting man right now, I'd say 8 teams between the SEC and the Big 10, probably 4-4 get in. I'm pretty confident that when you look at the Big 12 and the ACC, you're getting one team each. Whoever wins the conference championship game for both conferences. So if you go 4 is 8, 2 and 2 is 10. Then you probably go Notre Dame and Boise State. And that's it. And when you look at the Big Ten, like, I think we got a pretty good idea. It's a little less jumbled than the SEC. It's Ohio State, it's Oregon, it's Penn State. And I think unless Indiana loses like 100-0, like Indiana's in. The SEC gets a lot more weird because you're going to have a ton of two-loss teams, and there are going to be some two-loss teams that don't make it to the SEC championship game. And what if a two-loss team makes it to the SEC championship game, like Georgia, or if Tennessee were to lose this weekend and they have two losses, I'm just using an example, or Ole Miss or whoever, and they lose that SEC championship game. So now they have three losses, but they go, hey, we just weren't in this game, especially if it's a close game. We played an extra game. So that team with two losses didn't even make it. The SEC could get complicated. But I do feel pretty confident that you're going to get 4 teams from each conference. And the Big 12's kind of falling apart because BYU pulled one of the craziest games out of their ass. You know, the Utah AD was like ready to get fired. He was so mad. Iowa State's falling apart. Colorado now controls their own destiny. I think the networks, that's who they want. They want Colorado to win out and then win the Big 12 championship. So do I. That's who I'm rooting for. But I also think what's cool about college football is while individual games, like ultimately USC playing LSU, whoever lost that game, their season was very much alive, right? But it was clear going into that Bama LSU game that someone was playing for their playoff lives. And I believed in Brian Kelly. I'm just like, you know what? Alabama doesn't look that good. LSU obviously is coming off a bad half against Texas A&M, but the game's at home. Their offense should be really, really good. Their defense has played a lot better. It's just from a gambling standpoint, I'm like, how do I not take LSU as a dog at home? And that game was over pretty fast. I mean, we didn't even make it till halftime before it's like, this thing's over. And I think the cool part about college football is how these one game scenarios can kind of define you for a while. Like ultimately, the USC game when Brian Kelly slammed his hand didn't define him because he came storming back. And then even that first half against Texas A&M, it was like, God, LSU looks like they could be a problem in the playoffs. Then the second half comes. But his first half was good enough where it's like you weren't going to totally act like Brian Kelly was some idiot because if you watched him in the first half, I think the score at halftime was 17-7, but it felt like it should be 30-7. LSU was destroying them. And then Nussmeier melts down, and then it bleeds right into the Alabama game, and now they have, 6 straight quarters of getting worked. And we go from DeBoer, it's like, he's wearing T-shirts on the sideline. Nick Saban never would have done that. This team looks like they're going to be 8-4. They're fucking falling apart. The Saban dynasty feels like 7 years removed. What is going on? And now it's like, do the math. They're going to be 10-2. And guess where they're going to be? In the playoffs. And Kalen DeBoer, for the second straight year, with 2 different programs, is going to be playoff bound. Now, technically, last year was the Final Four, but you know what I mean. That was a massive win. And I think it's one of the rare cases where it's like bigger loss or like worse loss for a coach or bigger win for a coach. I think it was equal on both sides. I think that's a devastating loss for Brian Kelly. Not because he's going to get fired, not because he's going to get run out of town, but I think that the last couple of years, people still wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, and they got your hopes hyped up for this season. He was the guy in the USC game, and props to him for saying, no, Lincoln, we're not going to reschedule this game. We're playing you in Vegas. He was the one that refused to tap out. And I gave him a lot of credit for that. And then he lost. It's football. Fuck, shit happens. That Texas A&M second half, you're like, what the hell just happened? But you're like, hey, it's on the road. That's one of the craziest environments ever. Elko, the coach for A&M, was like, listen. He said that I would watch his press conference after the game. He's like, this place needed a lot of help. We had a lot of issues here. This program, we had a lot of different things. We had a to-do list, a mile long. But one thing that was not on there was this atmosphere at this place, as they call it, like 12. And it's hard to win on the road in the SEC. But at home, against a Bama team, which I think a lot of people question like how good it is relative to a lot of other Bama teams, and get beat like that, that one's hard to shake. And it's also a big moment for DeBoer. It's like, hey guys, you know who I beat this year? Kirby Smart. Last time I checked, he's under a contract for well over $100 million. Oh, and Brian Kelly. Yeah, I think he signed a $90 million contract. So if you do the math, I beat two guys that have contracts signed that are approaching or maybe over, depending on the language, $200 million. I beat them both year one with a quarterback that I didn't pick, who's much more of a runner than a passer. And if you've seen me coach like Jay Kane or Michael Penix, I want a pocket passer. That's how I call offense. But if I got to adapt, fuck it. 13 million Kirby a year, we'll kick his ass at home. Brian Kelly, what are you paying him a year? 10? You want me to go on the road to Baton Rouge? Yeah, I'll bend him over. Pretty big moment for DeBoer. Just kind of quiets everybody. Like, guys, this dude from South Dakota kind of knows how to coach ball. And this is the highest level of football. You have some devastating losses. It comes with the territory. I saw Sean Payton, his press conference after that loss to Andy Reid. He's like, the reality is, as a football coach and as coaching in this league, you're going to have games like that. And hopefully over the course of time, you're on the right end more than the wrong end. That it happens to you more than it happens on the other end. And right now, I would say in the Mahomes Andy era, it feels like for the most part, they have been on the right end of the majority of them. They've had a couple go the other way, right? The Tyreek Hill play against Cincinnati that kind of derailed that game, and they ended up losing at home in the AFC Championship game. The Super Bowl against Tampa Bay when they were missing their tackles, they got boat raced. It happens. But I'd say this for a guy that lost to Vanderbilt, which actually I'd say aged better because it's pretty clear that Vanderbilt's a real program, is like Kalen knows what he's doing. And if I was a Bama fan, I would not trade my coach for Brian Kelly. And if I was an LSU fan, if you gave me the option, like, would you trade DeBoer for Kelly? I'd be like, yes. I don't even think you'd hesitate. That's how fast shit changes.